And just tell me who you are.
Okay, I'm Nisa. I'm from TATS Cru. I'm one of the founding members here. One of the reasons why we started the company was when we, in the early 80s, we were painting subway trains. At the end of the 80s, what ended up happening was we kind of like stopped painting subway trains and we became young adults. We were like now turning 19, 20, 21. But what ended up happening was we were still getting together to paint in the streets on the weekends, just to, you know, get together, like kind of like, you know, it's something we always loved to do, even though we had like 9-to-5 jobs and always. So what ended up happening was we would get together on the weekends just to paint walls in our neighborhood, and some of the property business owners, actually, like local mom and pop stores and stuff like that, hardware stores, they would approach us and, you know, say how much would it cost to get you guys to do something on my store with my name on it, because I noticed, you know, you guys were painting, they wouldn't write on it. Meanwhile, I would paint it white and they would come and write on it. So, you know, we started scheduling things like that because we had regular jobs. So it was like, oh, we can do it next weekend on our day off. And you know, it got to be something where we started like scheduling things in advance, like a few weeks in advance, just because we were kind of booked every weekend after that. It was something that we didn't even plan. It just kind of like started on its own. And we started realizing after painting in dark tunnels and in the night, all these years, being kind of like, you know, these underground images, you know, like these kind of, because it was part of a subculture. So, but you know, painting in obscurity so that nobody knew who was painting these pieces on the subway trains. We didn't realize that the reverse of that, which meant that now we were painting in the street in broad daylight and being able to be approachable, and, you know, that, you know, there was something happening where now that we were accessible, people were walking over and like, hey, I always wondered who was doing that, and, you know, how do you guys do that, you know, do you guys charge for that? So we started doing little things here and there, and it kind of like started like snowballing. It was definitely a snowball effect. And then we started doing local businesses, and then around that time there was kind of like a surge in a lot of like the street violence and stuff like that, and you know, because of the drugs and the time, you know, it was the early 90s. Then we started, you know, being approached and asked to paint these memorial walls. So that was another facet of what we were doing before we started the business. And so between that and the commercial work that we were doing, we started realizing, you know, wait a minute, there's something here. We're kind of like eating from this painting.
Yeah. And
you know, then there was another thing that was going on in the 90s where we started seeing in a lot of ads, a lot of magazines, because remember, they were outside of the Source and other like small magazines like Rap Pages and stuff like that. You didn't see graffiti anywhere else.
Right.
But we started realizing, if you started looking through some of the, whether it be GQ or whatever magazine you were picking up, there were little glimpses and little like small usages of graffiti and backgrounds of a lot of like prominent ads for like, you know, name brands. And we started realizing that, you know, wait a minute, you know, this isn't done by a real graffiti writer. This is kind of corny, where they think everything looks like Keith Haring, you know, and it's not. That's not graffiti. So, but then we started talking, and, you know, we were just being like true graph heads ourselves. You know, we started, you know, being upset about that. So what ended up happening was the only way to fix something like that, you know, is to, you know, find a solution. And the solution was probably they weren't hiring real graffiti artists because there were no, you know, there were no access to them. Right. So, you know, we created like the first graffiti company of its kind of. And you know, when we did it, it was like, even when we went to get like the corporate seal, like, you know, to the corporation papers, it was like we sat at our lawyer's office And they were like, all right, so what are you guys gonna do? You paint signs? And we're like, yeah, but we're not a sign company. And, all right, you do ads? And we're like, yeah, but we're not an ad agency. So it was like, so, you know, it was all these categories. And he was like, so what do you do? We looked and we were like, we're graffiti artists. So he, I'm like, hey, you know, we started TATS Cru.
And what year was that?
That was, 96? It was about 95, 96. Because it took like a year or two to get off the ground at first. So, but around that time, one of the reasons why we also incorporated was we were being approached. We were actually doing some murals for Coca-Cola, which they had a project that they had an art contest in high schools, and the winners of they would pick 3 pieces of art, and they would get scholarship money and like supplies, and you know it was all this like these prizes for winning the competition. But one of the added bonuses was they would hire us to go to the kids' neighborhoods and on the local stores which were participating in selling their product anyway. They hired us to replicate the kids' artwork on the side of these. So it's kind of like the kids would walk by and say, "Oh wow, look, that was my stuff," and we would always write it was first prize or second prize. So it was like it was a cool project. It was called Paint the Town Red, and being that we started doing that work for a corporation, then it was kind of like it's time to get serious. So that was probably another reason why, or part of the reason why we incorporated. And because we started realizing that companies kind of like would rather deal with other companies as opposed to, because you got to remember, as an artist, first of all, people that aren't artists, they automatically assume every artist is like spacey, crazy, unreliable, and we were the flip side of that. Even though we are crazy, but one of the things that we were was reliable as far as starting a project, finishing it, seeing it through, and keeping the client happy all the time. So there was that professionalism that I mean it was something that even that had to formulate itself. And there's 3 of us, so everybody keeps each other in line, and like you're slacking, I'm not gonna do the work for you, but like any partnership, it's like it's like brothers, and you actually spend more time. I actually spend more time with my partners than I do with my actual family. So it's kind of like you start to realize the amount of hours and the days and throughout the years, you start calculating. You're like, wow.